Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Burnout Brighter. I have a very special episode for you today. Today, we are doing a review of the very complex and unique looking game Wildermyth by Worldwalker Games. And I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to Worldwalker Games for supplying us with the code for this game. And I am joined here with Matt, who has played the game. Hello, Matt.
Hello, hello. Yes, I've spent a bunch of time with this game and I'm excited to talk to you about it, my friend.
Perfect. Thanks. I, for the record, have not played the game. I did do some research about the game to find out kind of like what it is. But I'm going to be asking Matt what he thought because he has a lot of thoughts, which is why we're doing this discussion here. So, Matt, let's jump right in. And I want you to start by telling us, what is Wildermyth? What is it?
Yeah, so Wildermyth is one of the most creative games that I think I've ever played. It essentially takes D&D, as in Dungeons and Dragons, distills it into a very Fire Emblem-esque tactical RPG while throwing in like a ton of story all around it. It has like a really interesting art style where everything almost looks like papercraft. When you're in the overworld itself, everything looks kind of normal. It looks like a normal video game. But when you go into the actual maps to do the battles, it's almost like you're looking at a diorama. There's like characters are almost like look like 2D when they move. They kind of move like as if they were South Park characters almost. Like it all works very, very well together. So like there's a lot of choice. Every time you do anything in this game, it can be wildly different from the person sitting beside you. It's very, very heavily influenced by your choice as the player.
That sounds incredibly ambitious. How does that work for like minute to minute gameplay?
It works really, really well, actually. And like I'm really pleasantly surprised by how well this game functions. Like the kind of like one of the big selling points as one of the ways that it's been marketed is that it's almost like the game is the dungeon master and you're a player just inhabiting in it. When you're on the actual game map, and to clarify, there are multiple campaigns through this with varying degrees of length and varying stories, varying characters. You can also just do kind of like you can pick like a certain session, like a certain length of chapters, and the game will kind of build a bit of a story around the chapter length for you.
So is the game all randomly generated, or is it like a predetermined campaign?
There are five, I believe, predetermined campaigns, and then on top of that, there are also procedurally generated things that you can do.
Okay.
So what you'll do is you'll have your cast of characters. Depending on which campaign that you're doing, will actually change the minute-to-minute gameplay. But to kind of distill it down to its most basic form, you're on the map. You'll select an area you want to go to. You'll go to that area. You'll fight enemies. Rinse and repeat, but there will be stuff that happens. There will be events that pop up. The characters might get pulled away for certain side missions. Like there's a lot that happens inside of it, but basically it's map management on the overworld and then going in to do the tactical turn-based, very, like I said, Fire Emblem, Final Fantasy Tactics Advanced-esque battles.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, it does seem like it's trying to do a lot. As I said, it was kind of ambitious looking, as you could tell from trailers and previews. So from that perspective, what did you think of the gameplay? How did you enjoy it? How was the difficulty, and kind of how was that diversity of mechanics?
Yeah, it comes together really well. I'm a sucker for a good tactical role-playing game. I love Fire Emblem. I love Dark Deity. So being in this world actually works really well. You're given a choice of 3 kind of character battle archetypes. You have an archer, you have a warrior, and you have basically a spellcaster. And all of your characters will fit into one of those 3 into one of those 3 molds, though how each character plays will actually differ depending on which stats you choose to upgrade, which abilities you choose. So like I had one spellcaster that was very focused on nature. They were able to do more with like, tree trunks or wooden tables and stuff in the area, while I had other spellcasters that were much more attuned to things like fire and things like the mechanisms in an area. So there's a lot of customization within the actual characters themselves. So even though there are only kind of 3 base characters, they vary wildly in terms of ability and in terms of skills. So the battles themselves are well put together. You have like your XCOM style percentages of, are you going to hit them or not? the maps change well enough. Like the map variety is good. And then when you're actually on the map, like the overworld map itself, a lot can happen. Like you can choose to splinter off your crew as it gets bigger and bigger to handle different tasks at different areas. Some of which will just be like, fight the enemy. Others will be like, you actually might get a pop-up that's just like an encounter, and they'll say like, this character has something that they want to take care of. Do you let them go do that or not? And who are you sending with them? And then the side story will actually play out with these characters that can usually lead to some sort of substantial character shift. Like, for example, I had one where one of my characters got crow's wings, and then he's like transformed more and more into like a crow-like warrior.
Oh my god.
And there's like another one that basically became like almost like the Human Torch from Fantastic Four, where they started to just get engulfed more and more by like fire as they their abilities changed and stuff. There's a lot of customization in this game.
That is so interesting. So overall, you like from a gameplay perspective, you did really enjoy your time.
I did, yeah, because like it's every single campaign feels dramatically different. And the thing that I like too is that like each story for like the the campaigns that they have built for you varies quite a bit. The characters, so like you start off with the first one, the first campaign that you do is chosen for you. After that, you're free to do the rest of them in whatever order you choose, but there's a lot of carryover. You can actually pull characters from different campaigns forward depending on what you're able to do. If they die, you might hear like legends about some of these characters and stuff. Like it's really cool.
That's so interesting. And you just touched on it there a bit, which is what I wanted to get into next, is story. Because when I see these kinds of big like games with lots of choices, or if there is some level of procedural generation involved, like I want to know, how is the story? Were you satisfied with the story? Did you like it? How did like story choices work? Did you feel they were impactful? How was the story?
Yeah, the story, like again, and I think it's better to look at this almost like an anthology rather than one overarching narrative, because like each campaign has its own isolated story. Now, characters might follow through. There might be bits that you kind of like will link back to, but because the game lets you play after the first campaign, the rest of them in any order, they vary quite wildly. One will be about like this crew of enemies that are very machine-like as they are kind of rampaging across, and you're trying to figure out what's going on. The initial campaign will have you trying to fight off this like Gorgon Hydra-esque menace as it kind of rips through the map. So it's very much more like each story is its own self-contained thing that can kind of branch and leak into the others. Now, in terms of the overall narrative, I don't think there's too much player agency in that. The beginning and the end is quite set. It's what kind of happens along the way, and what happens more with the characters themselves rather than the overarching story. Like I had a side quest where one of my characters ran into their father, who they had not seen in quite a long time. And as you kind of have this conversation, you choose like, do you forgive him? Do you try and foster a relationship? Do you ignore him? Like there's a lot of choice within the characters' stories themselves, rather than there being a lot of choice in the overall story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So were you satisfied, you think, overall with the different narratives?
I think I was, because they are quite short. Like I think each kind of campaign can probably take anywhere from like 3 to 5 hours, depending on how much time you spend kind of in the battles themselves, and how quickly you read, and how much time you spend actually going to every area on the map. Because they're shorter, their pacing on all of them works quite well, and there will be actual, like, I'm a sucker for a good time skip, and a lot of the stories, as you kind of finish a chapter, they'll be like, because of your performance, you've kind of got this many years of peace. So your characters will age, they can get married, they can have kids, they can you can choose, like, there's a lot of representation in the game, because you can make your character pretty much whoever you want. They can be LGBTQ, they can be trans, they can be black, white, whatever. You can kind of create the characters to be who they want, and within that they can be the relationship that they foster, or whatever happens, marriage, kids, whatever, so on and so forth, kind of grows from that. So I'm really happy with the way that the game functions, because of how much choice you have with the characters themselves. I don't mind that the overarching plot is kind of set in stone. What I really like is how much the characters change and grow.
Interesting. Okay, that's really cool to hear. And before I get to your kind of overall concluding impressions, I think Destiny would kill me if I didn't bring up the art. What did you think of the artwork in the game?
I think it's really, really cool. The one thing that I will say is I wish there was a little bit more variety with the maps themselves, just because playing across all the campaigns, you will see very similarly put together maps. Now, granted, enemy spawns will change depending on, like, even for example, as you kind of go into a battle, sometimes you'll have a choice of how you want to approach it, which will change the layout of the map or where you start. But you will start to see a repetition of the maps. The art style for the characters themselves are interesting, and again, they can vary widely. They can become like wolf-like people or crow-like people. Like there's a lot of really cool ways that the characters and the art style can change. I just wish there was a little bit more variety within the maps themselves, because the art as a whole looks fantastic. It really does look like imagine going to the store and buying like a D&D box set, popping it open, and you have like kind of like these environments and stuff, these maps. It very faithfully recreates that kind of feeling. So the art style works for itself really, really well. I think it suits the game.
Wow. Okay. So I guess that brings us to our final overall impression. So I want to know, do you think, what are your final thoughts? Do you think it succeeds on that ambitious promise of trying to be basically like an entire Dungeons and Dragons campaign in a small story? How did you feel at the end of it?
I really, really liked the game. I think that it does so many things so well that the few things that it kind of stumbles on, like I said, things like the map variety and stuff, you don't really notice because you get wrapped into the world and the characters. If you're the type of gamer who enjoys character story more so than the overall story, and again, the overall stories have some, interesting twists and turns. There's some cool stuff to it. But like if you're genuinely invested in kind of making your own characters, and I think that's kind of one of the best things about D&D is kind of, the party that you make and seeing how they grow and change. This game nails that very, very well. Spontaneous stuff that'll come up that you may never expect. There are certain sub stories that might pop in, more than once. You might see some repetition. That's only because of how much the game is trying to accomplish. I didn't see a ton of repetition, and there's a lot of game here for people who are looking for more. Like I said, outside of the base campaigns, you can kind of have procedurally generated ones. So I think the game is fantastic. I think any D&D fan should check this game out. Any fan of tactical RPGs should check this game out. And even if you're kind of, listening to me talk about it, you're like, that does sound interesting. It's really cool, and I think it does far more right than it does wrong, and its ambition more succeeds than it doesn't.
Thank you so much, Matt. That's such an interesting game. I'm really happy that you're able to tell me about this, because like looking at it from trailers, I don't think you can tell how ambitious it's really trying to be. But then when you hear it described, you're thinking like, how did an indie team put this all together? Like it really, really cool. Really good job. Thank you so much for your review. And thank you again to Worldwalker Games for supplying us with the code.
Thank you.
You heard it here. Wildermyth is a very interesting game, and if anything that you heard today tickles your fancy, go check it out. Go check out this fantasy game. Live out your dreams. Thanks, Matt. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, I think, again, this game is awesome. Go check it out. There's a lot here if you're looking for it.
Thank you so much. So yeah, if you love this review, please like and subscribe, share it with your friends. You can follow us on Twitter at burnout_pod, I think.
Yes, sir.
And you can follow Matt at burnout_Matt.
Yep.
Me at burnout_Darren. And I'll catch you next time for our next review. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a nice day. See you later.
Peace out.